My name is Greg Allord, and this is a presentation that I was given an opportunity to collaborate with Aileen Buckley, a research cartographer at Esri, and kind of go through some various aspects of this. That we're going to kind of cover some elements here. Going to start out recognizing the importance and the need for sharing historical maps and where we can go with this. And then I'm going to go through a quick summary of demonstrating an easy, repeatable, and what we hope highly accurate way to take historical paper maps and then bring them forward for future use. This is an offshoot of a project I was working on before I retired, where we had done quadrilateral maps, about 180,000 of those, and georeferenced them. But here, then I retired. About a year later, I was given an opportunity at Esri to expand this and look at thematic maps, non-quads that are there. And then just mentioning on some where we can take these maps and use them going forward. So looking at it from the perspective of a historical map and the traditionally produced, engraved, printed maps, kind of came out of the industrial age. I realized that printing preceded that. But the majority of the maps, mass replication and such, part of the industrial age, and then transitioning into the information age that is there. But again, that's a continuation of printed maps and the rise of that. But there's a question about, have we really, in terms of mapping, moved from the historical analog age into a complete information age? In other words, making them available for use under current technologies. And open question on that. There are some organizations that are looking at doing that transformation from paper to digits, and there's activity there. But when you look at what's happening is the maps that have been georeferenced and put online are in the tens of thousands, and you look at some holdings like the U.S. Library of Congress that has 5 million maps in their question. It shows you the scale of effort and the information that is there and the transformation required. It's kind of a daunting task and what we're facing, but recognizing there are different approaches. What's going on, a presentation a couple hours ago was talking about historical maps of Manitoba. They had 1,000 of them, they brought those forward. So there are pockets of interest and people that are interested in this. I found that primarily librarians, the curators, the custodians of these maps are ones that are especially interested in this. They're trying to get their information out there, making them usable, answering research questions, but also making the data more available in a dynamic form. But what we're looking at is, I talked about two of the ages of man that we had in technology to the information age. But there's discussion that we're already moving into another age here that they have called the hybrid age, where again it's an amalgam of different human-machine interactions in what we have. And so I've given the reference here of people that are talking about the hybrid age and what that's going to mean. And some quotes up here that we're well into this already. It's not solidified, but it's coming. Okay, so some information about this is the fact that where we stand now is that half the world's population is under the age of 25. I'm very glad I have grandchildren, so I can associate with that fact, but I can observe it, especially the teenage ones that are there and what they're looking for and their view of the past. And then also is they're talking about that the translation isn't between cultures and such, it's now across generations. And that goes with the fact that, again, what I was talking about is the paper to digits to multiple use forms of information. And that the future, people are looking to using current technologies into the future, not necessarily looking back into the archives of the past. Okay, so again, small number of maps available for the information age. Concern is that we're not going to remember them. They won't be readily available They're held off in repositories, geographically distant from where you are, both physically and by access, and that we would tend not to use them. So what we decided to do, working with Aileen, was to pick an atlas. Again, I mentioned there were quadrangle maps, but we're looking at a thematic issue here. And we had picked this atlas. It's National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. They had done it at the Arctic areas, and decided what it would take to bring this forward. The atlas itself is just shy of a meter by 21 inches high, and it has hundreds of pages, and primarily though, the primary data maps are at 1 to 4 million scale of the Arctic area of the United States, Alaska and such. It was a very limited press run. It's also 32 pounds. So when I actually asked to borrow a copy, it was not a trivial task to ship it back and forth across the country. The closest copy that I could find, I live in Madison, Wisconsin, and it was across Lake Michigan. At the University of Michigan, in their library, they had one. So we were shipping it, trying to view it and such like that. So again, it's an access issue. Total number of pages, 256. This example what is there, we had 108 of the 1 to 4 million maps, primary that was there. There were also partial page maps and such there. They also are a rich set of information, line drawings, graphs, charts, other items that were there. So we took it and had it scanned at 600 pixels per inch and brought in as just as a raw TIFF image, and then started looking at the characteristics of the map. The map base credits had indicated that it's a modified transverse Mercator, but as we got working with it, we're in a polar region. And a modified transverse Mercator across tens of degrees of longitude raised the issue, is it really transverse Mercator? So we got doing some research on it and found that some people had actually done some empirical testing and said, no, it really more looks like an equidistant conic. And it works best that way. So if you use these projection parameters, not a transverse Mercator, but building your projection file with these characteristics, it actually transforms very accurately the characteristics of that map. So we had to do some basic research, getting ready to transform it, but then picking our control points. Again, this is not a quadrilateral map. There are no just fixed corners to it. So we decided that, looked at the map, tried different things, and picked 28 control points for these 108 maps. And just went forward with that. Again, they were scanned. We went through and had these control points, use this, the master set, moving forward. Okay. Again, we had our projection file, and we had some software. Again, it's an extension of the quadrilateral that would automatically look at detection of the map frame, assign the corners, moving there. But what we wanted to do is be able to put in different projection parameters, control that, and I had mentioned earlier, we wanted repeatable results in addition to the accuracy. So we had the proj files and put those in. You can have a basic setup. It will remember this as you move from map to map. And then you open your high resolution scan file, create a thumbnail of that, and start working with that thumbnail. And then you start adding control points. So again, of the 28 control points, this is the one that I just labeled 1, for argument's sake, in basis there. So the thumbnail is there. There's a small inset in the upper right. That is actually a 200 by 200 pixel zoom of the characteristics that are there. That's where you predict it. And you can input the latitude and longitude of that point, and it gives you the XY of the scan. UV in this case, what we're calling it in the data set. And then you move on around through the map and you add in all 28 control points. And when you're done, you can run the root mean square second order polynomial fit and get in pixels the idea of how accurate are you hitting the latitude and longitude predicted. And the color banding is just for our coding of seeing which ones, if it's red, we'd set a threshold, like 8 pixels. If it's more than 8, it would flag it as red. This needs to be fixed. So that's a idea there of where you stand. And all 28 are there. You've got it. Again, this is for documenting what you have, the accuracy, again, the XY UVs, latitude, longitude, and your error rates. And again, then you have the output. You can decide what you're going to do. You have some different output types that are available. You can have the raw scan with the geoheader, GeoTIFF, that is there. You can look at projected, that'll give you square pixels if you want in true geographic. You could rotate it to, because again, it was polar and skewed, or you can do an ESRI, aux XML, and save it that way and output the formats. So again, you have output there. You can save all the control points also, all your input points, latitude, longitude, and the control points. And if during the scanning of the 108 maps, you've been somewhat repeatable as to where you put them into the scanner and they align and have the same general 0 point for starting on the next scans, you can save those control points, open it on the next map, and say, here's our points. And this is more for my boredom threshold. 28 points, 108 maps, typing, errors, problems. So what you can do is you can start over, open the control points, feed that file in, and it will give you a start. You can see it's close, but it's probably 8 or 10 pixels off. You can go nudge it and fix it. Or if there's a systematic error, you can actually fix the file itself. So that's an example of that atlas. There's other things you can do instead of latitude, longitude points. You've got principal points that are based on something else. There is no grid on this map. So we went through and picked control points there and then did a latitude, longitude conversion, stored that, and had it available. But I will point out you need to be careful on this series of maps. We had about 80 of them. There were printing errors, that the printing plates were offset. So you can see on the left one, the latitude line is running under the county that is there, slightly there. On the next one, the latitude line is relatively different to the counties, as is on the third. So you have to be careful, and that's why we decided we were not going to use latitude, longitude. We're going to match to the counties because it was choropleth data, and match to the data, and then transform that. So again, we did that, and then ESRI is looking at making a web map app so that you can have this information, put it in, choose a light or dark contrast, put in different elements, have that there, have a template that can be used for this information, configure the template, bring it forward, and different non-map elements can be added to the template, and just to present the information that you have there. So again, you've got to bring historical maps in, go into the archives, find these, bring the important ones forward, and try and consistently and accurately georeference them and bring them forward. There can be positive outcomes. People are looking into this issue, and I think there's increased attention. There's been a lot of, I noticed, discussions, both at the International Cartographic Conference and here about old maps, new uses, and bringing that forward. And this is in here because we had worked on the NOAA Atlas, and then this summer, Daniel Huffman had put out an atlas that we did not realize. I did not realize it. I think others did. Little distance being retired, same area, some of the same information was his data source, and he did an amazing atlas, and it's available PDF, print, online, downloadable, and such. So that was out there. So I felt very good that we had gone back and had this available, and one from 35 years ago that's also there. Okay.